We're picking up with section 15, which is on page 22. It's called The Strength of Self-Reliance and the Super Strength of Self-Surrender. And I believe we started reading with this last time and didn't get very far, so we're just starting over. Swami Vivekananda used to convey the meaning of this philosophy of self-surrender and saintliness as the crown of self-reliance and manliness in a humorous vein in these words. The Muslims have a holy celebration every year, and they generally sacrifice a goat on that occasion. So intelligent Muslims will purchase the animal a month earlier and feed it well, so that when they sacrifice it, they get more meat out of it. That is the, I just remembered something that we're wanting to pause after each paragraph or so to see if anyone has any comments. So anyone have any comments so far? Okay. That is the way in spiritual life. First, strengthen yourself, assert yourself, and then sacrifice yourself, deny yourself in surrender to God through a super strength. That is the correct attitude and way. First comes manliness, then comes saintliness or godliness. Erect your saintliness on your manliness. That will be a powerful saintliness. So work hard, build up your individuality, and then when you are strong and spiritually mature as a man, you look up and see a greater courage and a greater strength beckoning you, which makes you experience and say, not I, but thou, thy will be done. End of paragraph.
You know, it reminds me of something that Swami Vivekananda had said, and it's, he's talking about, if we bring it out, I mean, we have the heart of a lion to meditate on strength and having the heart of the lion. And you know, it's talking about building, upon that. But so that's actually something I'm trying to explore, is actually meditating on strength in order to try to bring that aspect out. And I don't think I mean, there's masculinity and assertiveness in the world, but there's also spiritual toughness as well. And you know, to me, it's hard to be kind of new in this. It's kind of hard to convert. Um, it's kind of hard to convert it to discipline, and so that's what I'm trying to solve.
Yeah, part of the challenge, I think, is just settling on a schedule, a routine that you can live with, and I think that takes a little bit of experimentation until you get it right. You know.
Yeah, unfortunately, with my living situation, I live in one room for the most part, and so I don't. It's hard. I don't have any way of having a separate place to meditate and to do my practices. I have to move my puja setup, move my keyboard and mouse out of the way and set up, and and I really can see that there is a value to having a space that is nothing else but for that purpose, because of all the it may sound strange to other people, but kind of like just all the mental contamination from all the other things in the environment that are used for other things. And, so I don't know. I've been trying to figure out how I can accomplish that.
Well, it sounds like you're off to a good start because you have it worked out where you move your keyboard and stuff out of the way, and then there's your puja, right?
Mm.
So So that'll do until something better comes along. And meanwhile, just try to stay with it and work on a schedule that you can keep.
I mean, my my reaction to that is kind of think about the sages or munis who were meditating in little caves in the Himalayas. And so, Bhagavan Das, you probably have a little more space than that. And so, again, you can just imagine that a part of the room is your cave, and that will be the sacrosanct place for you to meditate.
I've heard stories about, people that went to such things and thought, well, I got this cave and I'm away from everybody and I won't be disturbed. And of course, your senses become more sensitive to the point where they're like, all the bugs and birds and all the things became so loud to them. They're like, this is this is worse than before.
And maybe the cave is a similarity. Your cave is really inside your cranium. That's where your mind is.
That's true.
That's the cave you need to really concentrate on. But
And
on a
the,
different note, that second paragraph on why the Muslim people will go buy the goat, but some of them would fatten them and then slaughter them. I didn't quite get it, but anyway, anybody else got it? What was
Well,
the
I think
takeaway?
he's going to tell you in the next paragraph that that's a metaphor for your spiritual life.
no, I think he explained that in the third paragraph, which starts out, that is the way in spiritual life. First, strengthen yourself, assert yourself, and then sacrifice yourself. Deny yourself and surrender to God through His super strength. So it's kind of like what Bhagavan Das was referring to, the efforts he's making to strengthen himself. So that's being compared to fattening up the goat.
So the sacrifice in the fattening of the goat episode is the same sacrifice in the third paragraph. We're saying you strengthen yourself and then sacrifice that strength.
Well,
Okay, got it. Yeah, got it.
with Vivekananda, he was big on, pushing the idea that we should be strong and that, if you're weak and if you're nothing, you're not sacrificing anything. But to have that strength and will and ego and then to sacrifice it, the will to where, like Swami Sarvadevananda told me, the machine has no will. But yet, if we sacrifice that will after we've become strong, then, we're a strong machine for the master. That's kind of my take on it.
Good.
So anybody else? Okay, moving on. This is the meaning of Sri Krishna's presenting the full message of self-surrender and divine grace in the last, that is, the 18th chapter of the Gita, as the final message of religion. Whereas previously he had always said, be strong, have faith in yourself, and face your problems manfully, as in verse 33 of chapter 11, after showing Arjuna his Visvarupa, or universal form. So the English translation of this verse is, therefore do you rise from this dejection and weakness, and acquire the glory of manliness by conquering your enemies, thwarting obstacles, and enjoy the prosperous domain of your life. Any comments on that?
I think when they say enemies, they mean within the self.
Yeah, in parentheses it says thwarting obstacles, so I think that's exactly what they're talking about, is the obstacles to our spiritual progress. So reading on, next paragraph. The next paragraph leads to another verse from the Gita, so I'll read the paragraph and then the verse, and then I'll pause. Before that, in verse 14 of chapter 7, Sri Krishna had struck the first powerful initial note of divine grace in a message of hope and assurance. Man is caught up in the delusion of his being the truncated ego and its organic system, and under that delusion behaves in petty ways and experiences suffering and sorrow, and scatters the same around in society. This is Maya, which makes him forget his real nature and his intimate relationship with the divine, the Lord of Maya, and with all other beings. It is divine grace that releases him from this Maya and restores him to God. Verse 14 of chapter 7 of the Gita, verily this my divine Maya, constituted of the three gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas, is difficult to cross over. Those who take refuge in me alone cross over this Maya. And that concludes that passage. So no comments, so I'll read on. The next paragraph is pretty short, followed by a real long one, so I'll read those two together. But now towards the end, he sings a different note and presents that initial note as the final note, as we have seen. Quote, now I tell you the profoundest secret. Having achieved all this manliness, say to yourself and experience that everything, including my ego, belongs to the Lord. There is nothing of me and mine. End quote. This is a kingly surrender. If a soldier is weak and timid, and with the first battle he surrenders everything and becomes a prisoner of the enemy, there is no virtue in it. Put up a great resistance, show your strength, then surrender if circumstances demand it. Then will the world respect you. We read in Greek history in its relations with ancient India that when Alexander came to the northwest of India, one of the kings of the Punjab at the time, Porus or Porava, king by name, who ruled over the territory between the Jhelum and Chenab rivers, and who was a very brave and strong man, put up a courageous fight against the all-conquering emperor. He was, however, overcome because Alexander's tactics were more efficient. He was taken prisoner and brought before Alexander. After a few words were exchanged, when Alexander asked him, now, how do you want me to treat you? He said in all dignity, treat me as a king treats a king. Alexander was deeply impressed and treated him with all respect and honor. And that concludes the paragraph. I'm thinking that that story maybe illustrates how it's important to be true to yourself and your values and your principles, and to be strong going in. It's like we discussed last week. If you say you want to renounce but have nothing before then, what are you renouncing? So I think this is continuing that theme of building up your strength, building up your character and your principles, and standing by them. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I think this paragraph is trying to hone in on the word surrender and how it should be kingly surrender, which is probably the first sentence right there. And then he goes into this Alexander and King Porus's surrender, and then obviously the dialogue probably brings back to the fact that even if a defeated king is still surrendering as a king. So
Mm-hmm.
that's probably what this is bringing out.
Right. Very good. Anybody else? Okay, I'll continue. Again, we have a paragraph followed by a verse from Tagore this time. So then there's a very short paragraph and another quote. So I'll read that whole part. As in daily human life, so also in the life of religion, God respects a soul which has worked hard to become strong and steady by cultivating whatever strength is given to him, and then seeks greater strength to surrender all that strength to him. How virtuous is that surrender! Of what stern stuff is such a surrender made? There is a famous verse in Tagore's Gitanjali. And the verse goes, "Give me the strength lightly to bear my joys and sorrows. Give me the strength to make my love fruitful in service. Give me the strength never to disown the poor or bend my knees before insolent might. Give me the strength to raise my mind high above daily trifles." Now, after this invocation of strength, there comes finally this highest music of spirituality in the invocation of a super strength. And this other quote from Tagore is, "And give me the strength to surrender my strength to thy will with love." So that concludes that portion. Any thoughts?
Well, just a little background. That Tagore's Gitanjali, Tagore is a Nobel laureate for literature, English literature. His book that got him the Nobel laureate prize is Gitanjali. And so this is a quote from that particular book. And obviously, the first few stanzas talk about strength in all different aspects of day-to-day life, but then obviously ends the poem. The last line is surrendering all that strength to God Almighty. So that's
Very good. Anyone else? Okay, the next paragraph will conclude this section. That signifies a greater strength that comes from God himself, ever dwelling within man, who is described in Vedanta as the fear of fear itself. As the Mahanirvana Tantra expresses it, and as, I'm sorry, I'm having to skip over some Sanskrit. When men and women with strength, physical strength, mental strength, and strength of talents and capacities, can stand before God and say, "All this is yours, O Lord, nothing is mine, thou art the all," what genuine human greatness and glory will be expressed in that final renunciation? Exclamation mark. So that concludes the paragraph and the section.
I'll jump in here, and I've been listening to this, to you read, and to y'all's comments. A lot of this is about not being attached, of course, to your own, lower self ideas about things, or being attached to the fruits of your labor. And the thing about it is early on in spiritual practice, we often feel that this, how do I let go of all that? But once you start to do it, and it takes, it's so liberating. I mean, there's nothing freer than just not having to be responsible for everything. Especially those of us who have a tendency to think we are. And that fear of fear that you just read that mentioned, that's what anxiety is. It's fear of fear. You know, it's experienced as fear itself, but anxiety is about fearing being fearful in the future because of something that you have no control over and have no idea what's going to happen.
It's fear run amok or fear out of control, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But just this surrendering your misguided notion that you are responsible for all these things, that you didn't make it, you didn't break it. Why are you trying to control it? You know, it's like, you know, I'm not saying any of this is easy to do or get a place to get to, but it is a practice. But I think every human being wants to be free, and what they want to be free of, they may not even know. But those of us on a spiritual path, especially this one, at least we know what we want to be free of. Um, and you know, the ultimate liberation may be described differently by each of us, but that's where we're heading. You know, we want sort of this relief from the burden of our attachments to things in the world.
You know, I was thinking a lot about that this week, you know, and even like literally physically getting rid of things, because it's just stuff is attachment, even, you know, to a certain, when it gets down, and, you know, and for me, maybe my take on my own personal life is a little different, because I came from a place of very using a lot of strength to do things in the wrong direction. And, you know, from, you know, jails and institutions, from, you know, living basically a criminal lifestyle, to surrendering everything material and worldly,
Mhm.
to, you know, like when we were last week, we were reading something, I'm not sure if it was this book or a different one, but, you know, you really start to feel like that lotus on top of the filth, you know, in the world, but not of it.
Mhm.
And, you know, to the point where you just feel like shedding everything.
And we are in a culture, of course, that makes it seem almost imperative that we have stuff. I mean, I've I belong to a Facebook group called that's a nonprofit actually that's nationwide, called Buy Nothing, the Buy Nothing organization. And you kind of get in with a group of your neighbors. You know, you ask to join Buy Nothing, and then they assign you a particular Buy Nothing group that consists of neighbors, you know, people who live within a certain close radius. And you give things away. And it's not the same as just putting things out there on the curb or putting things on, you know, you actually put something up and you say gift, you know, rocking chair. And people come on and say, oh, I would love to be considered for that. And it's not even a first come, first serve. So once you say, oh, I would love for you to have it, they come to your house, they pick it up, you chit chat, you get to know your neighbors. But it's not just this gifting thing, it's also asking. Like people will say, oh, does anybody have some folding chairs that I can borrow for the weekend? And people will put food up, like they made too much food or they have a bunch of extra something. And it's I'm just talking about this because it's such a wonderful way to not just throw things away if you are trying to get rid of stuff, which I'm always trying to do. Um, and it really makes you more mindful of things. Uh, But, sometimes Bhagavan Das, getting down to that lowest terms kind of point where you have had to let go of a bunch of stuff, maybe even unwillingly. Um, it's hard, but it's also, there's kind of blank slate, you know.
You know, I kind of consider myself lucky because I lived there a life for a while where, money was not an object. And, you know, and towards the end of my drinking and using career, I had tons of money and I was still, putting the gun and looking down my 45 saying, what am I waiting on? I was kicking my own butt for not shooting myself, you know, and it's just so it broke me of the idea that stuff and material things can make you happy. There has to be something else in life to make it worth living. And so
Sometimes,
But see, that's what our advertisers are telling us is that, yes, these things can make you happy. We get that message every day as we get onto social media or watch a TV show. We just can't avoid it.
and those folks have something to sell. They're not necessarily looking out for our best interests.
No, they're not.
Although social media is, it's like anything else. It can be great or it can be awful. Depends on, it's like the talk topic tomorrow. What deserves your attention? Um, the social media I imbibe mostly is YouTube because I follow certain YouTube channels, like people who are into simple living or what they call slow living or simple living. And I get inspired by these people and learn so much. So I'm glad for the internet, at least at this time, because there's so much resources I wouldn't have, uh, access to otherwise. Um,
Cindy, while you were describing Buy Nothing, which is buynothing.com, is that correct?
I think it's .org because it is
.org.
a
Okay,
nonprofit.
because it's a nonprofit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I was remembering the fact that way before the internet, I was an avid reader of the Mother Earth News,
Yeah.
and they were advocating that very thing. Before you buy something, ask your neighbor if you can borrow his, and offer stuff to your neighbor. And here today, something, I guess you could say it's internet based because it's by way of email, but I belong to a little email group that swaps electronic gizmos, computer stuff or electronic stuff. It's like, hey, I'm looking for a graphic equalizer. Anybody got one? And we'll just give each other stuff if we have extra.
Yeah, I love
And
that. I
yeah,
love that.
but it's stuff. I mean, I'm still trying to
Yeah.
deal with the fact that I have too much stuff, but at least it's a maybe slightly more honorable way of getting what you need.
And honorable and mindful. Like today, I gave away just a plastic dish drainer, and it wasn't old. And it was very inexpensive when I bought it, but I scrubbed it up really well before I put it on my Buy Nothing group. I didn't have to do that, but I do that when I give anything away. I make sure it's clean and something that I would like to give as a gift to somebody. Um, and this woman came and she was just so happy to have it because her brother is like starting out with nothing and really needed it. And, it just, I could have just like put it in the Goodwill bag.
Well,
And
you're being of service. You're doing karma yoga.
Yeah, it is. And it's also connecting with neighbors. I mean, some of these people, I wouldn't say I've gotten to have like friends yet, but at least I really have a connection to people in my neighborhood. And we all, it's a diverse group, economic, socially, all that stuff. And we kind of over time get to know some of the people in my group really are in need of things like just food. So we tend to make sure they get these things rather than just putting it up and anybody can have it. We kind of save these things for the people that really need it. And um, yeah, it's neat.
Cool.
Yeah.
We have a funny thing in my AA home group where, alcoholics, we always describe ourselves as, busting our ass, and then the thing is we could be doing nothing, but we always have that mentality. And my father is that to the nth degree. And, he's been retired for years, but he has so many toys that his whole day, his whole life is just go, 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 maintaining toys, seeing his toys, and he still has that attitude like he's just being, like in the salt mine, being driven like a slave. And he's a slave to his boats, his motorcycles, his, this and that. Like literally, like my mom would say, we had to buy 14 tags. We're paying insurance on 14 things, because I mean, he has like 5 motorcycles and 2 boats and trailers. And it's just like,
Do you think he's just distracting himself
well, yeah, I
from
mean,
himself?
well, it's that inability to be comfortable doing nothing and to be, I mean, that's what all the meditation and the spiritual path is to do, is to take away that, to realize the hole is not a hole for toys, it's a hole for God, a God-sized hole that we're
But
to fill.
that's where your pop is on his path. We're
Yeah.
all on a path. It may not look like it. I was sometime around the end of college, undergrad for me, and a little bit after for like 2 years. I was a fundamentalist atheist.
Mm.
I really was, and I realized later that that was just a part of my spiritual path.
Jim, but for
Yeah.
to me, I see it and I'm just like all the time and distraction, and
Yeah, I
that
know.
that
I
next thing is going to be what does it for me. That's what I'm missing in my life. And no, that's not what you're missing.
Well, but you know what they say in AA about, you just got to keep your side of the street clean. You
Yeah.
can't worry about,
Well, I mean, I'm
my,
not worried about it, but I
yeah,
just
you
see
see
it.
it. I
And,
know.
because I was that way, but now I'm so much going the other way. It's just, I'm like, I just see stuff as like attachments and tethers holding me down to this world and distraction and, you know, just stuff to be rid of.
Yeah, yeah,
So we're all on our evolutionary tracks. Cindy, when you were a fundamentalist atheist, you were thinking deeply about things, and that was part of your path. I'm real curious. If you folks don't mind a detour, we're kind of at a place where this detour makes sense. Would anyone like to share how they discovered this path, how they found Vedanta and Sri Ramakrishna?
Mine was from actually seeing Swami Sarva Priyananda on the internet and kind of having been in the Buddhist circles as a byproduct of AA, not because AA is Buddhist orientated, but you know, looking for a path to be on, so to speak. And the thing is the non-personal aspect of the Buddhist was throwing me, because my experiences with the Atman or God or whatever at that time, my concept of God was a more personal understanding. And so it just wasn't fitting quite right. And then when I heard Swami Sarvapriyananda, I'm thinking on some of his talks, he's either talking to me or about me. And so I said, I wonder if there's one of those, well, because I knew he was in New York. And I'm like, man, I'll never be able to go there. And so I just said, well, let me just see, where is the closest Vedanta center? And turns out I'm, pretty close.
And myself, I have always been a big reader, and I had read the abridged version of the gospel about maybe 14, 15 years ago. But recently, it was a few years ago when I was doing some intensive searching, and that's when I discovered, similar to you, Bhagavan Das, I discovered there was a Vedanta center fairly close to me. It's in St. Petersburg. It's about the same distance for me as going to Atlanta. So actually, I have two Vedanta centers that are somewhat convenient. But I started watching videos, and I just got hooked. Anybody else have anything to share on that?
Try meeting. I discovered the Vedanta Center of Atlanta before I discovered Vedanta, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
In 1996, I think it was. The center was not in Tucker, it was in Decatur, in a rented house, and I happened to live right down the street. And my friend Jerry Brunner, who was then still an active devotee at that time, he was also a friend and my music partner, and he knew that I meditated. Like Bhagavan Das, I was mostly a Buddhist, having been raised in the Episcopal Church, but I was mostly a Buddhist. But I did meditate, and my friend Jerry said, "Hey, there's a place right in your neighborhood where you can go and meditate with some other neat folks every evening if you're interested." And he said, "I usually always go on Monday." So I met him up there. I met Swami Yogeshananda, who was the founder of our center. And I liked it, and mostly I just liked that I didn't know anything about Vedanta. I did know a little bit about Hinduism. I wasn't seeking, a new path. I was pretty much into what I was into, but I really liked the Swami. I liked the small group of people that regularly meditated there. So I started doing that every Monday, but I didn't really get into Vedanta and really studying and reading the gospel and reading these books until Brother Shankara came. Because I'm not sure why. I mean, the center moved in 1999, 2000, moved from Decatur to Tucker. 4 years later, I moved from Decatur to Tucker. And again, right down the street, I'm less than half a mile from the center. And it was all by accident. And I continued to be semi-involved, but it was always peripheral for me. It was like, Swami would ask me to do things, usually musical, like, okay, we're having a this puja, whatever, will you and Jerry come and sing? Or I would do things like that, but it wasn't until Brother Shankara came, and Swami had been gone for a little over a year, and I had kind of stopped going to the center. And Jerry said, "Hey, have you met the new guy?" And I said, "No, I didn't know there was a new guy." He said, "Well, come on up." I went up on one puja day or something was going on, and I met Brother Shankara. And so I started coming to some of the classes because he taught them. Swami Yogeshananda was awesome, but he was really very, very much a jnana. very intellectual, very smart. He didn't do discussion, he didn't do read and discuss. It was mostly just read and lecture. And that's more typical, I think, of the way these things are taught. But Brother Shankara had from the get-go more of this, let's read this and let's talk about it. And a lot of people liked that. It was like, oh, well, this is different. And I just felt more like, okay, I can read this stuff that may seem really strange to me, because it does at first when you don't grow up with this. Being able to ask any question you want to ask about it in class. And that's why I was able to go, oh, to really start paying attention to it and not just objecting to things in my mind and then going away because I couldn't talk about it in class. So anyway, that's what happened. That's how I got here.
One of the things that I really like about the Vedanta is it fits my experience, but two, growing up in the Protestant Christian type world, and then that concept of God that I grew up with just really wasn't working for me. And so the Buddhist path was working for me, and I understand it, but there was still something missing. But the thing is about Vedanta is it helps me understand Christianity and Buddhism a lot better than I did previously. And, it's kind of like the missing piece that lets you triangulate between all of them to where you understand all of it a lot better.
And to add or to expand on what you just said, Bhagavan Das, what I like about Vedanta is that you have the freedom to explore however you want to go. If you want to go more toward the impersonal God, then you're a jnani yogi, but you're still involved with the Vedanta path. If you want a more personal God, then you can be a bhakti and still be on this path. You have the freedom to satisfy your personal inclination. So
Yeah, because as being like Christian, would be vastly more personal than like Theravada Buddhist and all. So it's like, the two polar opposites. I need, that third piece was really important to understand the both of them.
well, anyone else have any comments, or shall we wrap up this little diversion?
I'll just make a few comments. And
Sure.
I probably I started hearing about Vivekananda and Ramakrishna when I was probably a kid growing up. And I even remember that I had, just like you have illustrated comics of Superman, etc., I actually had comics of Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna and Sharada Mas. I could flip through them. And then in the very early days, my grandmother would actually read from the tales of Sri Ramakrishna it's written in Bengali. So, and my mother tongue is Bengali, so she would read it in Bengali and I would listen. So this is like, bedtime tales. So that's how I got into, in a very natural way, into what's Vedanta. But then when I grew up and I went to engineering colleges, I got interested and very much interested in the autobiography of a yogi, which, by the way, is really Kriya Yoga. So what we're really talking about is 6 pillars of Indian philosophy. Vedanta is on one end, it's the 6th. And on the front end is Sankhya philosophy, on which Buddhism is built on. And right next to it is yoga philosophy, which is Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which is on which Kriya Yoga, Raja Yoga, everything is built on. And so long story short, I find myself triangulating into three things. Obviously, reading the Gita, it has a lot to understand from. Also, very interested in Vedanta and the lectures. Obviously, I'm coming here and I listen to Sarvapirananda and many other YouTubes. But on the other angle, I am super interested in in the Sankhya philosophy, which Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is based on, which is Raja Yoga, which is a very, very specific style of meditation. So again, and I guess all these three philosophies out of the six keeps me intellectually challenged, but I'll stop at that.
But isn't everything that you described, Bhaskar, isn't that pretty much included within the larger scope of Vedanta?
No, Vedanta is there are subtle differences between Vedanta and yoga, and and you can follow parts of Vedanta and you can follow parts of yoga. And I'll just say this, that some of the, you can kind of go back and forth. So like, for instance, you have the concept of Atman and Brahman in Vedanta. You only have the concept of Purusha. You don't have any concept of Brahman. And what is Maya in Vedanta is Prakriti elsewhere. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. These are philosophies are really pillars, and you can follow one or more. And obviously, whether you call Kaivalya, which is liberation, or moksha in Vedanta, or ultimately you want to merge with the super consciousness. So all the paths will lead you there. And one last thing, Vivekananda, Gita doesn't talk about the four ways of yoga, but Vivekananda is the person that in the modern times has popularized the idea that you have actually four paths aligned by the four yogas. Raja Yoga, it starts with Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. And by the way, all of them, almost 3.5 of them, were written out of lectures in New York City. And it was funny that when the lectures would happen, it was almost like you going to church on Sunday morning and the lectures would happen, and somebody at the back, the caretaker or somebody, would be taking shorthand notes. And if you go back to Vedanta Society today, you will still see the Ramakrishna Mission, Sarvapirananda on the pulpit there, and in the back somebody's taking notes. So it's, there are some resemblances, but that's where the four yogas came. And to not just us, to the youngsters, to the 30 something, 40 something, these four yogas are very practical ways of becoming spiritual. You don't have to be religious. So that's the message I keep getting.
Well, from the perspective of Westerners like here, and like being born and raised in the deep South in the 70s and 80s, all these things are incredibly foreign to my family and people I know. And outside the center, there's no one in my daily life that I can even talk about these subjects with. And so, maybe we just don't have as fine of a discernment as you do for these things, because it is so foreign to us in our lives and circles for most of us.
And I wouldn't say, if this is a perspective, even though I was born in India and I spent half of my life there, and then I came here, it isn't until the last 5 years that I started indulging and understanding the pillars of Hinduism, the pillars of Hindu philosophy. So, Bhagwan Das, I was no different. I may have been born in India, and it may have been in my environment, but I wasn't indulging in that until very recently. So don't feel, I think there is an unseen hand or unforeseen hand that actually pushes you. It doesn't matter whether you're in India or USA or somewhere. It's some kind of a destiny that pulls you there, that unseen hand. And when it happens for you.
And I can add to that. Actually, I also was born in India. My father is an extremely spiritual person, but I was never a spiritual person. I was totally a materialistic person. Until 2 years back, some things happened in my life which pushed me to the corner. And then I started thinking, what is there in the life? And which all these materialistic things which I used to think is the end of it, they were not helping me at all. I was pushed to the corner. It led to me to actually couple of weeks, I think many months, I studied all the religions, starting from Buddhism, Hinduism. I am a Hindu by birth. Christianity, and then Islam, Confucianism, Taoism, everything I studied. And ultimately, it came down to what I understood, the soul. That is what it is. Then my mind was flickering, how to control that. I started reading Eckhart Tolle, I started reading Michael Singer, Gary Zukov, everything about that. And it did help. Then my journey continued. I read Upanishad and what Bhaskar was talking about. I just completed the yoga book by Swami Vivekananda. I studied Sankhya philosophy. I studied Gita, pretty much any spiritual book I can get hold of. I think I am still in that journey. I came to this group maybe 4 or 5 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks back, not more than that. I still want to see what this path takes me to. And I am, as of now, despite being a born Hindu, I am a firm believer of Buddhist philosophies as of now. And that will definitely continue, but my path, I'm still finding my path.
You know, to me,
Wonderful.
Thank you, Sunil.
it seems like the further you go down the path, the more they're all saying the same thing. And then you just hear it all as the same one message, really, to me.
Absolutely, absolutely.
just-
I think it is more of the terminology, like when I hear from Buddhist philosophy, right? It calls about emptiness, but no soul. So now what is emptiness? Ultimately, it comes down to, okay, everything is impermanent. So except what we call here is soul is permanent. So
One truth, many paths, right? Well, we have used up our hour with a very interesting diversion. Thank you for humoring me on that. I think it was good to hear everyone's stories, and we're glad that everyone was here this morning. Would anyone care to give a closing prayer? I'm at a loss to think of one myself.
Jai Guru Maharaj works for me.
We can do because are we still chanting? Yes. Jai Shri Durga.
Sri Durga.
Jai Shri
Jai
Guru
Shri
Maharaj Ji ki
Maharaj Ji ki
Jai.
Jai.
Durga, Durga, Durga.
Durga.
May we all be well.
It's 1 o'clock.
It's 1 o'clock. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we all go forward in a loving and protective embrace of the divine Mother and Father. Om Hari Om.
Thank
See
you,
y'all
Cindy.
tomorrow. Okay, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everybody. This was good.
And Bhagwan Das, our thoughts and prayers are with you. Our thoughts and prayers are with Brother Shankara, and of course with everyone. So
Thank you, Jeff.
You know, just from what we were just talking about, it's like, the unification of religions. And, growing up, like Islam, Buddhism, that's just pure devilry. But you get to the point where you hear them all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And, and you can literally just flow between all of them, and because before you couldn't hear what they were saying. But once you do, they're all saying the same thing.
Differences in language and culture can really trip you up, but look at how Sri Ramakrishna did serious sadhana with Islam and with Christianity, and was realizing the same truth with all of those paths.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the message for all of us. I wish the rest of the world could hear it.
I try to tell my mom, I'm like, Christianity, God wasn't invented 2,000 years ago. And why do you think, and I'm like, all these cultures all throughout time, all around the world, have all been talking about the same God. It's just different cultures, different language, but they're all saying the same thing. And that is just cannot be tolerated to them, and I'm like, what can I do?
Well, all I can say is if their religion is working for them, that's great. There's many paths to the one truth. It's just too bad.
That's something we, newcomers in AA, when the wreckage of their life is piled around them and they pull the Jesus card, and we're like, so how's that concept of God of yours been working? You kind of point to all the wreckage, and it's like, it don't look like it's working so great to me.
When I was a youngin' in the 60s, we lived in Atlanta, and my grandparents lived at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And back then they had not yet expanded all the interstate highways. So a lot of traveling from Atlanta to Myrtle Beach was back roads. And I remember back in the 60s, there was a truck stop, a big, famous, well-loved truck stop called Mammy's Kitchen, which, by the way, Mammy, a lot of people, especially not from the South, think of Mammy as a derogatory term for a Black woman or Black mother.
Yeah.
But in fact, my best friend who's from Macon, who's white, they called her grandmother Mammy. There are a lot of, it was just a word people called their grandmothers. Anyway, Mammy's Kitchen. Now, all along whatever those back roads were to Myrtle Beach, you would see these big signs, all roads lead to Mammy's Kitchen. And once I really started thinking about the Divine Mother, I was like, all roads lead to Mommy's Kitchen, whatever you call her. All paths lead to the mountaintop. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But I liked the truck stop because there's this welcoming, come off the road and I'll feed you and I'll take care of you, and this loving, nurturing.
Now I think about it, the real defining moment for me in all of this was when I was first coming into AA, and my grand sponsor asked me, he said, so how is your God, meaning your concept of God, how is that working for you? And I was doing some serious time, and my house was in foreclosure, the wife was gone, my dogs literally died. And and the wreckage is piled up around me, and I was thinking, I literally had to be insane, something. And and so when he asked me, well, how's that God of yours been working for you? And I had to really think about it and be like, it's not, and being raised in the South and Christian Protestant, in the our way or the highway to hell kind of thing, I had to get over the guilt and the of
conditioning.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, I still don't dare tell like my grandmother or any of that my concept of God is not the one I was raised with. But once I got past that and got past the that feeling I was doing something wrong by having a different concept and finding a concept that, literally then on the path trying to find a concept that did work, that's when everything turned around. But I really had to contemplate, is this concept of God that I have working for me? And it clearly wasn't. So,
Well, good for you for digging deep and finding a path. That's wonderful.
yeah. But it's really, we all have the same problem. It's just, it manifests in different ways, but it all boils down to the same question.
Which is
Your concept of God working for you? You have to think about that,
yeah.
and if it's a no, well,
Yeah.
but it's that surrender, that self-will run riot.
So, Cindy,
Yes.
going back to your story about mammies, I think there was a little bit of Divine Mother there where she was reaching out and
Oh, definitely.
caring for folks, and all roads lead to Divine Mother.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we would, of course, always stop at Mammy's and have a nice, delicious Southern cooking lunch at a truck stop. I love truck stops. I need to get back on the road one of these days, but it's different now. I liked it.
It's hard to find the little independent ones nowadays. Everything is corporatized.
Yeah, there's still some good ones, and there's still some back roads. There's still some back roads. It would be fun to do them if I ever actually retire. I would like to do that. Just get in a camper van or something and take off.
Sounds good.
Well, anyways, good to see you guys. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting, but I hope I
Okay.
see you guys in the morning. Brother Shankara may or may not be with us, but if he's not, he'll be there in spirit. And yeah, they may kick him out today. So,
Well, if he's not able to conduct the service, will someone else?
yeah, I mean, he already asked me. He said, "Look, just read my notes that I have. They're just, the things that were in the newsletter, and as an opener, and then just talk about the topic, because the topic is what deserves my attention, which is a great topic and can be very open. It's not like you have to know about Vedanta scripture and stuff and principles in order to really I mean, it's just such a great topic. We've talked about it today. So,
Well, I have a conflict on Sunday mornings only because my guru, Swami Ishtananda, gives his talks at 11 o'clock on Sundays,
okay.
and that's kind of where my priorities lie. But maybe I'll barge in late if I can.
Oh yeah, I mean, it might well go late because
Well,
we
look at
all
us.
like to talk about
Look at
stuff.
us. We've run late.
Well, I'm lucky in that respect because Swami Sarvadevananda is on the West Coast, so I can do class here, and then 10, 11 o'clock at night, I can catch him too. I really like, he holds a class every week on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna that's been going a long time. And, and he'll go off on tangents and stuff that are, you can really get a lot out of them.
So Sarva Priyananda?
Sarvadevananda.
Oh, Sarva Devananda. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's the minister in, is it San Diego?
No, he's the head of the Hollywood, the Southern California,
Okay.
and he's over our center. He's actually technically our head minister. Shankara is our resident minister.
Right.
So
Floating
a
resident.
lot of the people at our center were initiated by Sarvadevananda.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's
Or Swahananda if you were around.
So he's of particular interest to a lot of us, being our guru. So
Right.
but it's amazing that we do live in a time to where I can just look and see what he's saying every week.
Yeah, and it's great to be there, even though it's not in person. The live aspect still is better than watch. But then again, you can catch up with the videos as well. So
Yeah. It's interesting to me that Zoom was already in operation before COVID, but COVID introduced it to so many people, and now COVID is subsiding, but we all have this experience now of sharing community in another way that where distance doesn't exist. And I
yeah, it's pretty wonderful.
think,
And
yeah,
I'm glad that Zoom stepped up at the beginning of the pandemic and, because they couldn't really handle it right away. They were like, what? All these people are suddenly using our platform. But they've done such a good job that Zoom has now become just a generic word for online meeting,
It's like Coke in the South.
or Xerox for
Yeah.
yeah.
photocopies. Still do that one. Anyway, well, it's good to see you guys. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting and have a great Saturday and see y'all tomorrow.
Okay, y'all too. Thank you, Cindy.